The next thing that I'd do is slightly different in Italy. They actually do an under-20s and under-18s, but you might have a reserve team, which is when I would definitely do contract at the top, and then I would sort by wage, and then see whether there was people who were on a higher wage. So let's just say that, I mean, Juan Jesus is a bit annoying that he's actually gone to Roma. But say if this Caner Erkin, if he was still at the club, he's on the loan at the moment. Let's see. He's actually only getting paid 33.5 out of his 55, which is another thing to look at. It's a bit annoying that. So we're actually paying 21.5 grand a week for him just to go and play at Besiktas. But say he was still here, 55 grand a week, I would definitely go and offer him out. So transfer offer to clubs and get him gone. He's actually not that bad a player, to be honest, but I'm just giving him as an example. So yeah, that's something to look out for. Under 20s is slightly different. These are more of your youth teams, but what you can do from here, which is another thing that you can do from the other screen, but you should probably know your players but that are in your first team, is you can do reports from up here. And in the same way that you did from the scout main before, you can do ability and potential. So if we do potential ability, this Radu guy looks like he's pretty good. But as you can see, the ability at the moment is only 1.5 star, but he's got potential to be that good. Now you'll notice that these ones here have got like a black star at the end, which basically means that he's probably going to get to 3 star. He might get to 4 star, which is pretty good, to be honest. And this guy especially, I do really like this guy, this new Corey guy. Yeah, he's going to turn into a really good centre midfielder. He's listed for loan at the moment and some clubs that want him. Now, I'll actually offer him out. So you can offer to clubs, and in the same way you can do a transfer, you can do a loan offer. Now, they've added playing and unused at the moment, which I think is quite a nice feature, to be honest, because it used to annoy me that teams would just take my player on loan and they just wouldn't play him. So what I'll usually do now is that, obviously, because he's got good potential, I'll say that if you play him, you can have him for free. If you don't use him, you're going to have to pay his wages. And I'm happy to do that. These are just some little things down here for the loans. So you can play against their own team, can't be terminated, things like that, and can be recalled. I would always leave recalled on for players that you loan out, but if you loan a player, I would always remove that, which is why I just automatically did it then, is because my brain just short-circuited into that. But what it will mean is that you can bring this guy back. So if he's not getting any games, you might as well recall him, because you want him to be playing, so you can recall him at any point and then either let him play in your under-20s until the January transfer window, or you can try and get him on another loan. But for players that you loan in, particularly if you needed to select first team up here, just to get them on loan, because otherwise they wouldn't have come, say, if they didn't want to be a rotation. You can get him as a first team, and he might kick off throughout the season and say, oh, you're not giving me enough game time. But if you remove can be recalled, the parent club can't take him back. So you can just keep him for the whole season and basically sort of abuse him, to be honest, and do what you don't want everyone else to do to your players. But it means that you can build a squad based upon loan players a little bit better, and you can get some better players in by obviously selecting first team up here rather than rotation, which might mean that he might reject your loan offer. So we're going to offer him out, and we'll see if anyone comes back. I presume they will do. So that's pretty much it for this part up here. So then we go into the big one, which is tactics. So I just skipped the tactics creator and let it come through to this screen. So there's quite a lot going on this screen. So where should we start? We'll start off up here. So you can select this little drop down. You've actually got 3 of them up here, which means that you can basically load 3 different formations to be training at one time, and they'll all have a familiarity, which if you click that, it will show you how familiar they are with the current formation and team instructions that you've set. So I do like this formation. This is a formation that I play quite a bit, to be honest. So let's have a look at mentality. These are pretty self-explanatory. I've seen a few different people use counter. I don't particularly like using counter. I think as most defenses of our go is standard. It will go forward when you're supposed to and come back when you're supposed to. So it's not really that worth doing counter, but maybe you could do counter if you really wanted to. Control, I've found that you can do really, really well with control for quite a few games, but then I think it does say in this, yeah, beware of your opponent's counter-attacking threat. It's just a little bit annoying because you do usually get counter-attacking goals against you. And I did go through a period of time of just playing attacking from the off. I like playing with wing backs, so if I selected those as wing backs with automatic on, it'll make them fly forward more if you had an attacking set up here, which I do like, especially if I was to play sort of like, if I moved him in there and I played like a narrow formation, you want your fullbacks to be pushing on, so it's more like a, he might drop in, it's a 3, and then them two will push on, so it's like a 5, and they'll be delivering crosses so that they can provide the width. Recently though, I've been playing standard most of the time, so I'm going to leave it as standard for now. You've then got your team shape, which these are pretty self-explanatory as well. Is that like an Arsenal would probably be like a fluid or very fluid, where they move between positions. Structured might be a bit more like a West Brom, maybe something like that, where everyone just sticks to the position. You just focus on your area of the pitch. Don't try and move around too much, and we'll just try and like sort of bolt our way through the games and just not really allow any counter-attacks or any attacks for the opposition to be made from us being maybe out of position or someone not swapping over correctly. For an Inter, I've been leaving it as flexible for a lot of my recent saves. I know it's obviously quite a safe choice to do standard and flexible, but I found that there's always just a bit of a cost of doing one of the others. Whereas with these, maybe there is a cost, but you're kind of ignorant to it. But maybe for this one, we'll do fluid, as it might be quite nice to do something maybe a little bit fluid with intern or a little bit more switched on these players. But I'd say that in the lower leagues, I would definitely go for definitely a flexible, maybe even structured if you really wanted to do that. The next important bit is the team instructions. So this will basically decide how you want to play. So you can change these at the top, which is the same as the mentality over here, and you can change your team shape from here as well, which was there. Tempo, I used to play higher, but I've realised that actually you're supposed to, I used to play higher and shorter passing, and I thought that would basically mean that we just really zip it about. But what actually happens is this tempo forces the players to make the decision earlier than they would do. Whereas slow or lower for tempo will basically mean that they're kind of more, they make the decision with more thought rather than just passing it really, really quickly. And like a higher one is more suited to like a long ball game, where you might want to just pump the ball constantly and try and get it as far forward as possible. So at the minute, what I've been doing is I've been leaving it, again, pretty safe, but I've been leaving it as normal, which I think, yeah, balanced tempo throughout the match, increasing when necessary and slowing it down. So it just gives you kind of the best of both worlds. And especially the way that I play is I retain possession and I either play like mixed or shorter passing. So I don't really want them to be slow, because I think if we can counter, then it's worth us playing with a quicker tempo. But if we are just keeping the ball, then I don't want them to be passing it too fast. So yeah, I think keeping it on normal is pretty safe. You've then got time wasting, which you might want to have. One of the 3 tactics you might want to have is like a last 10 minutes, sort of like 1-0 up with 10 minutes to go sort of formation, and you might want to put time wasting a little bit more. I think that might come, yeah, if you change this to defensive, it'll go to frequently here. So yeah, you might want to do that on one of your formations. You've then got width, which is basically how wide your team will play. So whether you want them to play right to the touchlines or whether you want to keep them quite narrow so that they're kind of harder to break down. I always play with the maximum amount of width, but this is completely up to you with how you want your team to set up. Defensive line, so a higher defensive line will basically mean that you'll compress, so that if you were doing sort of like a closing down game and you wanted to win the ball high up the pitch, maybe like a Liverpool are doing at the moment, you'd play with a higher defensive line. But obviously you would want faster defenders to do that, because one ball over the top and someone's just going to run in behind you. In terms of what I do, I play slightly deeper. That's because when it comes to the closing down, I do more. And if you see when I click more, it actually pushes the defensive line forward. So if I just do that, it'll actually push it forward. So it's kind of like playing, I think if I do that and I do, yeah, it's not so far away from playing sort of normal with sometimes closing down. So it's not really that deep, but it just means that the players will track back a little bit more and sort of go into a bit more of a little bit of a harder shape to break down. So I play slightly deeper, more on closing down. You can prevent the short goalkeeper distribution. So if you're playing with two wingers that were quite far forward, you could do prevent this, which will basically mean that the keeper will have to kick long. And if you've, say, you've got like a defensive midfielder that's really good in the air, or two really good centre backs who are good in the air, then you might want to do that so that the keeper's got to go long each time and they can't play out from the back and sort of build an attack. I don't really do that too often. I always use tighter marking, and if you read this, it actually says in defensive situations where players are encouraged to stick particularly close to a assigned opponent in order to prevent them attacking the ball. So I don't really know why you wouldn't do that. Maybe if someone can tell me why you wouldn't do that, that would be interesting. But I always do tighter marking because I want them to be tight. I don't want them to be stood off someone and they end up getting skinned after they've not marked them properly, or we end up losing the goal because of it. In terms of tackling, you've got stuck in, stay on feet. I leave this. I never really select either of them, but you can decide what you want to do. You might want to set this. I'm going to show you the player instructions, which is basically individual player instructions for the position. So you might want to actually set that per position. You might want your left back and your right back to stay on the feet, but you might want your centre midfielders to get stuck in, for example. So you can do that individually. So I just leave that, because what this will do, any of these will determine what you can do in the player instructions, and it'll give like the default player instructions. It will basically either override them or it will default to whatever you've put. So if I click get stuck in now, then all of my players will have like a harder tackling set on their player instructions. So if I just leave that off, build up play, again, pretty self-explanatory. It's whatever you decide. I like to play out of defence because I don't like to lose the ball, and I don't like them to pump it forward because then it irritates me so much when there's a highlight and then we just boot it out and then they end up winning the ball back and then it's their highlight. And then you can either play through the middle or through the flanks. Now, I'm not sure whether this is advised to be done, but even in a formation that's similar to this, I'll still play exploit the flanks, and I want my fullbacks to push on and actually play with these two midfielders here. I'll play them as move into the channels, so I'll still have the width, and I've still got the width here as well. So yeah, I want to play down both flanks and play out of defence. Passing to space will mean that if you want to, I think probably more if you like countering, things like that, then it will knock it just ahead of the player, and you've got quick wingers and a quick striker, then you might want to select that. I don't do it for this formation because I do this, which is restrain ball possession. And you'll notice that this will then go down, which means that even at mixed, it's about the same as shorter, but they'll still hit longer passes even if they're going to keep possession. So I'm thinking maybe it's a little bit more like if when Paul Scholes used to pick it up in sort of the deep line playmaker role and he'd do that spreaded pass across to like the right back or the left back, then he's hitting it longer, but he's still keeping the ball. So I kind of like to do that. You can play shorter passing, you can play more direct, or you can literally go route one, a bit more of an Allardyce approach. But yeah, the way that I play is like that. Creative freedom is how much you want them to basically go against whatever you've selected. So like a disciplined approach should be, they'll just do like really simple things, won't try anything too expressive, and then expressive obviously they'll try and do everything that they can possibly do and be really creative and stuff like that. Again, I'll leave that for this part, and then I might select it in some of the player instructions instead. And then you've got your attack, which is basically in the final third what you want to do. So this again is completely up to you. For this type of formation, I'd definitely want to look for an overlap and then work ball into the box. I've been flicking between this recently because I'm not sure how I want it to work, but for this one, I would say, yeah, let's work the ball into the box. Especially if you've got a good poacher as a striker, it's probably worth doing that, because if you can get it out to the wings and you can dominate the game, and if you're retaining possession, you don't want to force anything if you're retaining possession, so working it into the box is good. And then once you've worked it into the box, if you've already got like a good poacher striker or just a good striker overall that's like a fox in the box, then obviously he's going to pop up and score quite a few goals from this type of thing. So that's what I do. You can then decide what type of crosses you want. The only thing that I would say with this is that, say you had like, I've just started a Sunderland save as well. So like I've got Jermaine Defoe up front. So I've selected low crosses for this because he's not really going to win anything in the air. So it's worth just fizzing it across the front really low and hard, and then so you can just tap it in. Whereas if you went for like a floated cross, the defenders are pretty much just going to win the header every time. I usually leave it as mixed when I've got like sort of different strikers, or if I'm playing with more than one striker and maybe one's good in the air and one's not. It just gives it a little bit more of a well-rounded, but if you want to be specific, you can do from here. You've got dribbling, so you can either run at a defence or you can dribble less. Pretty self-explanatory. You can basically tell them to either try and run at people or don't run and pass the ball instead. And you've got freedom of movement, so this is a little bit more like with the fluid. Either you can get them to stick to the positions or roam from the positions. I don't really tick either of those either, but it depends on what you want to, how you want to play. You might want to do one of those. So that's pretty much it for how I set up at the moment. If I wasn't playing with if I was playing with two wingers instead of with the fullbacks as width, I'd pretty much just take that out, and that would be how I would play. And then maybe if I was changing a formation, I didn't want to keep possession too much, I might do that. And that would be pretty much as far as I go in terms of how I play at the moment. So we're going to leave that on. So as you can see from here now, we've got it set it as this 4-1-3-1-1. And then what you'd want to do is, well, we'll save in a minute, but that's basically how you would save the formation, is by clicking that and saving it. So we've got that at the moment. So the next part of this tactics screen is the player. Now, as you can see, you've basically got the formation that you've selected here, and if you click on each of these players, it'll basically, it's pre-filled some of them depending on what their actual role is. So if I just go back to the overview, I just need to change a couple of these. So I used to play with an anchorman, ball winning midfielder. I've found that I like that a little bit more at the moment. Play with 2 box-to-boxes, maybe another box-to-box, and then maybe a playmaker, advance forward. Yeah, that seems like it's all right. I mean, I don't really play this formation too often, but like I might play like a 4-3-1-2 or a 4-1-3-2 maybe, something like that. But at the moment, I have always kind of wanted to try this formation, so we'll just set it up as this for now.